Hello everybody, my name is Boulevard and welcome to Tournament Tactician patch 3.2 tournament tier list for A Curious Journey. Now it's a day one tier list, everyone. It's not going to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I imagine that a lot of things are going to change between now and next week, but there is a $1,000 RuneterraLife tournament going on this weekend, and I'd like to impart you a little bit of wisdom onto you if I can. So, given that the set and a balance patch came out at the same time, what you want to be looking for, the gems hidden in the dirt of the previous meta, are going to be well-performing, solitaire-like game plans. Things that don't really care about what your opponent was doing. They were just worried about accelerating their own game plan. And the two biggest ones I think that are sticking around, at least in my eyes, are going to be Yordles in Arms and Bandletree, both of which are going to have to fight for the Gnar spot. And honestly, I think a lot of lineups are going to find that, like, you have to fight for the Gnar spot. Everybody would love to bring 3 Gnar decks. Bandle City Noxus is just, like, insanely popular right now. There's a lot of different lists that you could be running in that regional combination. So you're really going to have to think, if you're bringing multiple Gnar decks, which one is the one that doesn't get hurt by not running Gnar? Because Gnar is a lot like Draven. You're not really building your deck around Gnar. You can cut him from just about any Gnar deck, and it will still function well enough, unless it's something completely new. But for the most part, like, Bandletree is going to do just fine if you take the Gnar out of it. Yordles in Arms is going to do okay if you take the Gnar out of it. Bandleburn probably needs the Gnar a little bit more than anything else does. This is not really a deck that was performing well until Gnar released, whereas Yordles in Arms and Bandletree were already doing just fine. Bandle City Swain, another one where you can go back to the Teemo variant of this, but I do feel like the Gnar is a lot better because the problem I've always had with Swain decks has been their threat density. Usually it's like Swain and Leviathan, and that's about it. And yeah, the teeny Dactyl and the Toad have helped a little bit, but probably not enough. I would definitely like to keep the Gnar in there, but at EU Fight Night we did see a fair bit of success happening with the Teemo Swain variant, so, it all remains to be seen. Maybe the Teeny Dactyl and the Toad were enough, and then Gnar Akshan. This one, you could put in Sivir instead of Gnar. It's not the craziest thing in the world, but I do think the Gnar actually adds a lot here because you are looking to take advantage of the overwhelm of the leveled Gnar, as well as the ease of leveling Gnar for something like the Absolvers. So, Papercraft OTK, I would definitely say, like, if you had to build a Gnar deck with a lineup with 3 Gnar decks, this is the one that I would try to leave the Gnar in. But that's really neither here nor there. That's something that you can kind of feel out in terms of, like, comfort with the other lists. But so tier 1, Yordles in Arms been performing well both in tournaments of the previous set as well as on ladder. Faint HD hitting rank 1 with this a little bit earlier on. I think it took him less than 24 hours to hit Masters, mostly playing that list. But the Lulu variant is still fine. It looks a little bit different because obviously you're going to be main decking Flame Chompers, but I do think this is still a very solid archetype. Lee Sin, as I've mentioned before, will remain tier 1 as long as it exists in its current state. Bandletree had an absolutely crazy performance at the seasonal, and I don't necessarily put it in tier 1 based off of that performance. I just think that getting Gnar is something that this deck was looking for a lot, where Hidden Pathways got nerfed, and that did impact the draw power of this deck, because people didn't really swap over to Whispered Words like you thought they might, so the additional Pokestick generation from Gnar really helps you supplement the lack of draw power that you're missing out on from not playing Hidden Pathways or something along those lines, on top of the fact that he is a good Freljord unit, which is really what you were looking for in Bandletree so that you can cut down on Protoporo. Now, as far as the actual champion split, a lot of people are going for 3-2-1 with 3 Gnar, 2 Poppy, and then 1 drop champion, be it Teemo, Fizz, or Kennen. It really depends on how you want to build out the deck, but still, across the board, Bandletree performing absolutely spectacularly. Darkness, another deck that feels just a little bit overtuned from the previous meta. Overtuned doesn't even really feel like the right word because that almost implies that I want Darkness nerfs, which I don't think is the case. But it is definitely the control deck that is playing a proactive enough game plan. Proactive is the word that I wanted, not solitaire. You want proactive decks from the previous format. And Darkness can play rather proactively for a control deck because there are so many units in it, so Darkness still doing fine. And then Bandleburn seems like the big winner aggro deck from A Curious Journey. So this is definitely something that I think a lot of players are going to have their eyes on. Bring this alongside Spiders and maybe even Pirates or whatever third deck they choose to go, maybe even like Draven Rumble. But I do think that a lot of triple aggro lineups are going to be popping up this weekend as players are looking to pick on some of the newer decks that people are experimenting with, because even though it is a tournament setting, people are going to be playing decks that they just, find interesting, that they've been playing on ladder. If they've only been spamming new stuff, they're going to have to play that in the tournament because it is now their comfort decks. Getting down to tier 2, Sivir Demacia is still fine. This is a deck that has been pretty mixed. Week in and week out, it's constantly in fluctuation in terms of how good it is, and it's getting a little hard to nail down and honestly a little annoying, but I think that it is a solid enough deck that it'll do fine on the opening week. I definitely don't like it as much as Papercraft OTK. For those of you that haven't seen this deck yet, It's what am I used to hit Masters. It's actually extremely reminiscent of the Ionia version of Sivir Akshan back when it was like Sivir Z, and you were really looking to finish off your opponent with Flurry of Fists, with the idea being that you would level Sivir, you would attack with Sivir and Ruin Runner. That would give Ruin Runner quick attack. You could then use Flurry of Fists to give the Ruin Runner double attack, and you would kill them like that. We're doing the same thing, but now instead of Flurry of Fists, we are using Papercraft Dragon. And the reason I called it Papercraft OTK is because you're just giving double attack to an Overwhelm unit, and then, you know, sort of playing the old school Shurima, Akshan buff package in Absolver and Shapestone, and trying to get it up into the range to kill your opponent. Now, you don't have like Twin Discipline or Sharp Side like you get out of Ionia or Demacia, so you really are kind of all in on getting an Overwhelm unit, be it Gnar or Ruin Runner. But I think this deck is extremely solid, and I really haven't seen a lot of people playing it or talking about it, so I don't know if I'm overvaluing it, but I've been a very big fan of this deck thus far. That's kind of like my pick for like high tier 2 if I had something like that. Vandal City Swain, another blast from the past coming back in due to some of the new cards, working well with both Swain as well as Gnar, getting a little bit more threat density in there. Overall, a pretty solid list. I've been playing this a fair bit on ladder. I'm being a little mixed on it, if I'm being honest, but this is a deck that consistently performed while it was relevant in the meta, but it did definitely feel meta-relevant, and I am a little curious to see if this is something that's actually going to stick around in a tournament setting, or if it's going to get outgrinded by a lot of the control decks that we expect to see, because I do believe I picked up a tournament win earlier this week with, I think he said it was like Feel the Rush, Lee Sin, and Darkness, or maybe Darkness wasn't the third deck, but I remember Lee Sin and Feel the Rush were in there. So control is something that players have their eyes on, and something like Vandal City Swain does run the risk of just kind of getting outvalued. After that, we've kind of just got some leftovers from the previous meta. You know, Scouts, Spiders, Ari Kennen, Feel the Rush, Faded, the Pantheon Taric. Pantheon's kind of up in the air right now. Players are trying Pantheon Yuumi to mixed success. It seems like Pantheon Taric is the one that has sort of maintained like this 50 to 52% win rate on ladder, but obviously people aren't you know, super excited to get, you know, a new set dropped. Let me just run back my Pantheon deck. Now you could put Yuumi in here, and that seems to be working okay for players, but I really value having a secondary champion that you can put on the field, and I am a big fan of the Taric. I haven't really seen anyone running the Shyvana variant anymore, but I think that there is some exploration within the Faded archetype that is going to come out over the next couple of weeks. I don't think players really have looked into this one too much because it's a little boring, and maybe Yuumi isn't the answer. Maybe we actually go more dragon oriented and play like Pantheon Dragons with like Mountain Drake and Shyvana again and all that kind of stuff, but that remains to be seen. That's just a theory. We'll see. And then tier 3 is, I wouldn't even really pay attention to tier 3, because when you make a tournament tier list, the one thing that you always have to keep in mind is, you know, obviously like, okay, what did the previous meta look like? What were the decks that were sort of middle of the road in that one? And then identify which ones were there because they performed well into that meta, and which ones were there because they had a relevant power level. And that's something that's a little bit hard to get a read on. I tried to keep on the ones that I think are here because of their relative power level, and then sort of cut some of the fat of the ones that were only there because they were meta relevant. Like Starspring obviously comes off the tier list after we get out of the seasonal format, because that's just something that players play at seasonals because it beats Lee Sin, and Lee Sin's, you know, a long-standing tournament performing deck. But that is what I wanted to sort of highlight and impart on you. Definitely going to be a Gnar-filled weekend. I would be very surprised to see really any lineup that is just completely absent a Gnar deck unless it is triple control. I think anybody who's running any kind of aggro or mid-range style lineup is going to have a Gnar deck in there somewhere, and even triple control might end up on Bandletree as one of their decks, and you know, that's a Gnar deck. But it really is Gnar's weekend. Like I said, Gnar is really just kind of the Draven of Vandal City right now, and Vandal City does not feel like a region that needed a Draven, and it got one anyway. So, really not expecting a lot from Galio. Haven't been impressed by those decks in the slightest. I'm sure that there's a good one out there, but nobody seems to have figured it out just yet, and I don't think the tournament landscape is really going to be affected by it, especially if players are bringing triple aggro. Then things like Fearsome, of course, are going to do very well into formidable decks. Udyr is about as hot garbage as everybody seems to have predicted him, and Yuumi kind of hanging out in Pantheon decks, but doesn't even seem to be the best option there. So, if I were playing this weekend, I'd be boring. I'd be Lee Sin, Bandletree, Darkness, baby. Like, these are just 3 decks I've played a lot of. I really play a lot of Bandletree on ladder right now. I really like how the Gnar fits into that deck. Again, nothing too exciting, but I think this is just like a very solid lineup. Maybe I've put in the Papercraft OTK somewhere, but like instead of the Bandletree, but you know, that is what it is. Anyway, hopefully that was a little helpful. I don't want to talk too much because, again, it is just a week 1 tier list. Take it with a massive dump truck of salt, because it's not going to be perfect. It's going to change a lot going into next week, but hopefully anything I said stuck with you. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, and since I am wrapping up here, I do want to mention, I know I've talked, this is a, if you just came here for the tier list, you can stop watching now. This is about me. I mentioned after the World Championship, like, hey, I'm looking to get into doing more YouTube stuff, and I have good news on that front. I am actually now working with Giant Slayer TV, and am uploading YouTube content onto their channel, so I will be doing that a couple times a week. So if you are just looking for more Boulevard content, go ahead and go to Legends of Runeterra by Giant Slayer, their YouTube channel. I'll have it in the description down below, because I am now posting videos over there a couple of times a week, so that is where you can find all of my content, putting out deck profiles and not the tournament tier list. The tournament tier list will still be on this channel every Friday, like it has always been. You'll probably get less sporadic videos from me. Not that you were really looking for those. But I am just doing video content over there now. A couple of different things. It's going to be a little bit of a variety, but yeah, go ahead and go check that out if you want to continue to support me. So thank you so much for watching. As always, my name is Boulevard, and good luck in your tournaments.